Hello, and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show. I am Ray Walters. In this segment, I will be talking to an educator for 38 years. 17 of those years she spent in the classroom, and 21 of those years as the Dean of Business at Saddleback College and Vice President of Workforce and Economic Development at De Anza College, both California community colleges. She was a leader of the pack, publishing 25 technology-related textbooks, and then out on the speaking circuit across North America, assisting educators in implementing these new technologies. Her adventures have led her around the world, often solo or with a few great traveling friends. She has one son, Kristen, who is sprinkled throughout her book as a very important part of her life. Her writing adventure led her to the role of president of the Palm Springs Writers Guild, where she enjoys meeting and learning from dozens of professional writers. Viewers and listeners, our guest for today, Miss Marley Bergerud. Hi, Marley. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this.
Finally, now we're able to talk. I'm very much excited to learn from you. And Marley, you've written a book. Can you tell us about this book?
Oh my gosh. It's a memoir of tragedy, forgiveness, and the power of redemption. And it's one where I have finally been able to reconcile many things from my past. Let go of all of that and deal with the devil. And the devil in the book, I thought at one point it was coming from a parent, but it's really three devils. It is one of abuse, alcoholism, and then cancer. But I wrote this book so that people who have gone through any one or all of those devils can come through it as I have and have an incredibly wonderful, adventurous, successful life.
Okay. Marley, I just want to go ahead and squeeze this one in. This is a deep personal journey of yours, this memoir. And you definitely have the inspiration. But what made you decide to share the story, as this is personal for you? Did you go through sort of like a time wherein you're deciding on whether or not you're going to share it?
No, it is interesting. It's because writing seemed to be part of who I was, with all of those textbooks I wrote in life, which you need to do as a teacher. You're always writing something for your classes. And I just felt I had stories I needed to uncover for myself. And that took me really to understand where I got to where I was, which is at the beginning of the book. And that's I was at an incredible conference, and I was one of the keynote speakers, along with Buzz Aldrin and others of that ilk. And I had a very unfortunate event that occurred because I had way too many things to drink. And so I realized I had to figure this out and do something about it. And I had been seeing a therapist off and on in my life for a variety of reasons. And I asked him if I was an alcoholic. And he gave me a scenario of what my life was going to look like, and basically that I would be dead at the age of 55. and I was still in my 40s at that time. So I decided I needed to do something about this. And so I did the usual going to AA and in trying to understand how I got here, because my grandfather, my father, my mother, my sister, and now me really had the genetic predisposition to alcoholism, which I said I would never be, but I became one. And I was just a functional drinking person, like so many of our friends are.
Mhm.
And so I went through quite a path to get where I am. And so it's been 34 years since I've had a drink. And it's not even something I think about, but I do. I've sponsored a lot of women, and I try to do things to give back so that they don't have to endure some of the things that I did. But I also was trying to understand, how this can happen. And my father had such internal rage that writing about him in this book and understanding his background with his father and how he was abandoned and had to take care of the family, the mother and two sisters and a brother. But more important is when he was 12, he was severely burned. And I wrote about this, and actually I had to really understand what happens to burn victims to try to understand what he went through, because he was like strapped to a bed for like 2 years. And so in his adult age, as my father, he too, like his father, became an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And and he had just such rage, and he took it out on me. Therein lies one of the devils of
Yeah.
abuse. So I just was trying to understand it, and writing about it and reading about it and learning
Mhm.
about it helped me get through that. And we did reconcile before his departure from this earth, and all of that is good.
This is for me an encouraging book because it talks about the devils that you shared, abuse. A lot of your potential readers have gone through that one way or the other. Alcoholism too, and cancer and reconciliation. Was it tough, Marley, for you to have to relive because you have to put all of your life experiences in this memoir into writing? Was it tough for you to do that?
The part learning about burn victims and my father was difficult,
Mm-hmm.
because it but yet it was rewarding, because I learned what he must have gone through,
Mm-hmm.
which helped him become the devil that he would become when he was
Mm-hmm.
drinking. But the one of the toughest ones, other than that, is writing about the abuse of my father to my mother and saving her from literally being strangled one night when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
And then the fallout from that was, for me to be beaten by my father. Now
Right.
I have two sisters, and neither one of them got a hand, but I just was very defiant, I guess, which was part
Mm-hmm.
of my problem. And so I got what I got. So, but writing about his behavior, it was quite cathartic for me in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, but it also helped me understand where his rage must have come from.
Yeah.
So the the past of his being burned, and then when he tops it with alcohol,
Yeah.
it just would all come out. And we became very wonderful father daughter
Yeah.
through my life, but it was very good for me to write about it.
Yeah. That's a good thing. I think it takes a lot of courage for one such as yourself to look back. But what's really nice about what you did for me is that you try to understand how your father got to drinking and what were his reasons. And that's nice. We're able to understand where he was coming from. Marley, with that being said, how long did it take you to complete this book?
Oh, actually, over a period of 6+ years. And it wasn't where I sat down and did it all in a day, but I did go to Italy. My
Mm.
son actually sent me to Italy for a month, and he said, "Go write the book." And so I went with my little iPad, and I sat in my room overlooking the Piazza del Campo in Siena.
Mhm.
And I would eat a little something, and then I would write. And then I would go out and take a little walk. Then I'd come back.
Mhm.
And I did this every day, not knowing a soul, not speaking the language, which you don't need to anyway in much
Mhm.
of Europe. And I wrote. And I used to think, oh, I've got to have a printer because I am so visual. I like to see what I've written, but I
Mhm.
didn't. I had my yellow pad, and I just started writing. But I've been through multiple developmental editors.
Wow.
Some
Okay.
would say, they would say, "Oh, get this chapter out of here. You don't need this at all." And no, it's
Mhm.
not about your father. It's about you. This is the narrative about you. And anyway, and we want your son to be in the book, scattered throughout because it helps bring whatever. And then I learned about this thing called Freytag's. I don't want to say this wrong. Freytag's pyramid.
Yeah.
And Ginger Moran was my editor at that time, or developmental editor. And she made me do a spreadsheet of my whole life.
Mhm.
Seriously, a written Excel spreadsheet of dates, times, and events and whatnot. And then what's the inciting incident? And that's where the book starts. And she would say things like, I want this, get rid of these 20 pages. I want you to turn it into 6 pages. And it needs to sound like the opening of a Netflix movie. I said, well,
Mhm.
that's not a big order, is it? Anyway, so and that's where the book starts. It starts with, I'm at the top of my game. I'm this keynote speaker, as I mentioned, at the Copley Plaza in Boston, and I meet Buzz Aldrin and others,
Mhm.
and it then goes on and becomes quite a horrible event. And that horrible event helped me turn my life around.
Right. When I was reading through your background, the introduction you have, and even on the author biography on your book, um, you're an educator and you've led a team to write textbooks. So, is it safe to say that you were fully a technical writer? Is it difficult to transition when you're writing, when you're
Oh, yeah.
technical writing and then you're storytelling? Writing a
Un-
memoir.
Unbelievable. It was very difficult because there are two different sides of my brain, or
Mm.
maybe five different parts of my brain. I don't know, but yeah, it's yes. To write about emotional things versus technical things, it's just very different. And I'm not good at writing dialogue, which I
Mm.
really want to improve. But yeah, and I think that was part of what helped me so much working with these developmental editors. They they would throw things out and move me in a different direction, and uh, it's like someone would say, "I read what you wrote, but what did you feel?"
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's that, my little technical brain side versus the feeling side. So it was hard, very hard, but having worked with so many wonderful writers and authors, and as part of my work when I was president of the Palm Springs Writers Guild,
Yeah.
I met so many great authors. And so probably over a 5-year period, I probably went to 50 outstanding workshops.
Hmm.
And so I was constantly learning and reading and writing and throwing it away and starting again. My advice to other people would be sit down with a yellow pad, do an outline, then
Right.
start filling in the outline and just keep going, but make yourself sit down and do it. Most of my friends said I'd never finish, but I did.
Okay. Marley, as good as a technical writer that you are, how did you take in the criticisms when you started working with these developmental editors? Because not everyone can take even constructive criticism. So how did you take it in? Was it hurtful at first, or did you just,
No, it was educational. It was like
yeah,
they know better than I do. I've got
okay,
to follow their lead.
right. So tell us the part where you were doing your research uh, and making a commitment to finish this book. Because I believe one of the most difficult, or two of the most difficult uh, hurdles that you'll encounter is doing your research, making sure that your facts are right, and this is a memoir, and then making a commitment to finish it. Can you talk to us about that, your experience?
I think that my abuse growing up as a child gave me a kind of drive to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that drive has also caused me to get the education that I have and learn everything I can about something before I attack it. It's like the technical books. What did I know about operating systems? Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And yet my co-authors, one was Jean Gonzalez and the other Don Boucher, and we would just pour over every technical manual we could find and just write, because our students were going to need to find out about these things, which, because there were no books at that time about things as simple as word processing. So seriously, in like 1983, maybe even a little earlier, I was at an education conference looking for books about word processing, and there weren't
Mm-hmm.
any. They thought it was a book about words. When I'd go to the vendors and I was asked them, and they'd say, "Well, what is it about?" And so this one gentleman with John Wiley and Son said, I think you've got something there. So he flew me and then to be my co-author, Jean Gonzalez, back to New York, and we sat with John Wiley and Sons, and are one of their publishers. And so he agreed to do this book about
Yeah.
word processing. It wasn't even hands-on, but I said, I'll only sign a contract if you will agree to do workshops across North America for me to be able to teach teachers what this technology was all about. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did that. I would teach all week, and then on Friday night I'd fly out of town and I'd teach all day Saturday, and I'd come back on Sunday, and I did that for 6 years. And I had a 6-year-old at home.
Wow. So this is your memoir. How did you manage to be committed? 7 years. Were there episodes where you had a writer's block, you don't want to finish it at all, or you were just really so driven to complete your work?
It took that long because I think of relationships I had in my life that took precedence, and or other things that I was deeply involved in, like the Writers Guild. And yeah, it takes a kind of commitment where you just have to
Right.
sit down and do it. And some people say you have to sit down at the same time every day, but
Mm.
I did, and I think the other people in my life over this period of time, they were very encouraging. Some would say, "Oh, you're never going to finish that thing," and of course that just even spurred me on more. but but I did, and it's a commitment.
Your book's been out for a while now, under Ex Libris, right? Was
Yes.
it August of 2023? If
Mm-hmm.
so, you must have had received feedbacks.
I have some reviews that are on Amazon. I don't have any from the publisher, but I have one. Would you like me to read it to you?
Go ahead.
Okay. Marley Bergerud's unwavering honesty and eloquent prose make this memoir a compelling and unforgettable read for anyone seeking insight into the human capacity for redemption and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And that was by Ginger Moran.
It's a good one. That's what makes this book interesting for me, because you as an author, you learned, you did your research, you were committed to finish this. Um, Having mentioned that you've learned Freytag's pyramid as a writing structure is
Mm-hmm.
really good, because it involves exposition, rising action. You have the climax and then falling, and then there's this resolution. Because I think a
Mm-hmm.
great story, and this is just me, I'm not an expert, but we've watched a lot of series. I've read a lot of books, and it's important for me to know that I'm able to follow the climax and the falling action, and then there's this resolution
Mm-hmm.
at the end. It's like my closure to every story that I read. It's incomplete for me. Maybe because that's just how the books that I've read were written. So this is an interesting book. What advice can you give a writer working on his or her book?
I was going to try to make a joke, but I better not. Um, Make the commitment. And if having a ritual of writing at a certain time every day, then do it that way. If it
Mm,
means going away and shutting yourself up in a cabin on the mountain, do it that way. But it does take a fierce commitment to what it is you are trying to accomplish. And I have I have pieces within the book that were also very cathartic,
okay.
um, about best friends. And one of my best friends killed herself. And I call that chapter The Unforgivable. And and how that impacted my life and so many others. And but back to your question is advice to others. But you know, the memoir covers such a gamut of pieces of my life, one of which is my adventures.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you one real quick one, okay?
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
that's one of my co-authors and best friends, Don Boucher. He's on most of the technical books that we did together. He
Mhm.
and another girlfriend, Angela Satterley, and I have traveled the world together. But one trip he and I took was to China in 1989. And we went for two reasons. One was we had a friend that taught at Saddleback College with us. His name is Ken Yangguan Ha.
Okay.
And we were going to visit him in Yunnan province. But we
Mm.
also had paid to go to the first US China Economic Development Conference in Beijing. And so we went to the conference, and we were able to go down to in a bus with, Ambassador Lilly and other people from Senior Bush's cabinet were at this conference. So we all got on a bus, went down to see what was going on in Tiananmen Square. And that was so phenomenal because it's not just a little place, it's like 24 acres of humanity that were protesting simple things that they needed and wanted in life. Anyway, we saw that. And as I'm about to leave town, or we are, the conference is over, and we left a day early because we heard that the proletariat were not going to let this Tiananmen Square rioting, as they called it, take place. And so I thought we better get out of town while we can, because there were things that were going on that were not good. And so we're at the airport, and this blonde woman who spoke English said, "Are you going to Hong Kong?" And I said, "Yes, we're in Beijing." And she said, "I'm with CNN. Will you take this tape for me?" It was a VCR tape. And I said, "Sure." Well, I wouldn't do that today if you paid me a lot of money. And so I did. And I said, "Well, what should I do with it?" She said, "There'll be somebody that will receive it on the other end." And I said, "Well, how will I know that person?" She said, "Well, you will." Well, I will, because there were very few blonde Caucasian women in China at that time. And so as we're coming down the ramp with our luggage, I had noticed one blonde woman standing in the crowd, and everyone else is Asian. And so I just take my bag and go out to the curb and open my bag, and I've got a bunch of VCR tapes because I use them for my presentations in Yunnan. And I take the one that I know this person wants, and I just put it up on a post. And pretty soon this blonde woman walks by and takes it and says, "Thank you." Now, I would no more do that today for anything, because my luck, I'd blow up a plane. And so what you saw about what went on in Tiananmen Square was on that tape. So that was one of my more exciting adventures.
Right. And and that part of the story, your potential readers can go through in full detail in your book.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I also had interesting time and Donna and I went to USSR, first Leningrad, then Odessa, then Kyiv, and then Moscow. And in Moscow, my son was studying at that point in college in the summer at the Pushkin Institute. And I also had a friend by the name of Yuri Sinikov, and I had entertained when I was living in Orange County, California.
Okay.
I had entertained 4 Russians on a people-to-people tour, and I took them to big performing arts centers and dinner at my house and whatnot. So on this trip, we were invited to one of the gentlemen's homes, and that was quite an experience. And his wife made wonderful food for us. This gentleman happened to, at that time, be the TV producer for Yeltsin. So it was a very strange time in Moscow because no one was on the streets but Russian soldiers. Right. And in the shops, there was nothing but maybe one thing on a shelf. And people were buying rations. Like if today was sugar, you'd buy all the sugar you can because you'd never see it again.
Right.
And I was able to spend time also with my son's Russian family that he could stay with when he wasn't at a dormitory. So that was a wonderful experience. But the gentleman that we visited, Yuri is his first name, they gave me a gorgeous amber necklace as a gift. I didn't claim it because it was a gift. So I got pulled aside by 2 very large people who took me into a room, and Don said, "Yeah, that's it. We're going to jail." Mm-hmm. And anyway, they patted me down, and because I hadn't claimed it, they fined me. But I couldn't quite explain in any other way other than it was a gift. It wasn't something I bought and didn't claim. So I learned
Right.
quite a lesson on that one. But that was an interesting little adventure trying to get out
Right.
of Russia.
This is an interesting memoir that you have. Uh, one for me, whenever I read books, it's with the intention to leave my present state. Whenever I'm stressed, whenever I'm bored, I want to read a book because it takes me to another world. And memoirs are just that. I mean,
Mm.
you try to identify yourself with the one who's narrating and try to see life the way they're seeing it. So this is going to be an interesting book. So, um, Marley, what are your personal and professional goals this year? Your book's out, and so what are your professional book goals this year and
Well,
personal
that
too?
is a really great question. Um, I met someone who graduated from the University of North Dakota.
Okay.
I originated in North Dakota. Yeah, you
Mhm.
betcha. And I spent a couple of years at that university before I transferred out to California for lots of reasons. And in getting to know this gentleman, who's also a director of plays and movies, he is trying to help me get on a conference at
Mhm.
that university for next March to speak. And then also for me to turn the book into a play. So I'm not going to do the script because that's not my strength, but to get it turned into a play. And then he wants to help me take theater to film.
All right. Okay. That's very interesting.
No, that would be fun. That would
Yeah,
just be great, great fun.
I bet it would be for you. Where can our viewers and listeners pick up a copy of your memoir?
Amazon, My Dance with the Devil. There's a lot of different dances and devils on Amazon, so you have to look for the right one. And Ex Libris and Barnes and Noble.
Okay. Well, Marley, it was a very good conversation. And as they say, if there's a beginning, there's always an end. But before we're going to end this short but sweet conversation, I'd like to ask you to give a final message to your potential readers who are going through abuse, alcoholism, and having to be at peace with whomever they need to be at peace with. Final message.
It takes an internal strength, I think, that survival instinct that all animals have and people, I think,
Mm.
that in writing about one's life, I think it helps shape what you've been, what you've gone through, and helps you come to the realization that you can survive almost anything. And, my life's not a downer at all. There have been some very difficult times, but just knowing that there's always tomorrow, and
Right.
if you put your head down and get into it and do it, you can get through it. And certainly surviving abuse and alcoholism and cancer was not easy, but it was part of the journey, maybe the journey I was supposed to be on. And I've had a wonderful life.
Marley, this conversation definitely was short, but encouraging. It's really encouraging. So I just like to thank you for allowing us to have you for this episode of the Book Connection Show.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you.
Well, to our viewers and listeners on both our YouTube channel and on our podcast platforms, thank you so much for watching and listening. This is Ray Walters. Join me again on our next interview here on the Book Connection Show.